So, once the election comes around, have you ever found yourself staring at the ballot paper and wondering what to do and how it all works? Well, you're not alone. So in this week of the West Report Live, we had special guest David Cox from Auspol Explained pop into the studio to help us explain how preferential voting works in Australia. Why how-to-vote cards might not be as powerful as you think, and how a handful of preferences can change entire elections. Joining us tonight on the panel is also Leo Puglisi from Channel 6 News, Michael West, the man himself, and our host, Steph. We hope you guys like this new kind of video.
I have to look up how this stuff works every election cycle, I swear to God, because it gets kind of complicated, you know. I bet that you'd be able to rattle it off, though, David.
Absolutely. So let's imagine that we're in a contest. Let's imagine there's 5 candidates. Let's say someone called Josh gets 5%. Someone called David gets 10% of the first preferences. Someone called Leo, 10% as well. Steph, 35%, and Michael, 40%. Congratulations, Steph. You've done it pretty well. You haven't won.
It's a hard campaign. Yeah. Full credit to the boys.
Yeah, no one's got a majority in this situation. I mean, Michael has the most votes overall, so if we were doing first past the post, he would just win outright, done, even though 60% of the electorate didn't vote for him. So the way that preferential voting works is you rank all these candidates, and if no one has a majority, they eliminate the lowest person. So, Josh has 5% of the vote, he's done. Let's say that 2% goes to me, David, 3% of his vote goes to Leo, none to Steph or Michael, they don't like you. Before, David and Leo are tied on 10%, but now I've only gotten 2% of the preferences. So I'm eliminated from the count. So that's 12% of the vote that needs to go somewhere else. Preferential voting is a great way to resolve a 3-way contest. Ideally, the best way to win would be the guy with the most first preference votes, because, well, you can't be knocked out of the count that way, because everyone else is below you. Ideally, really, to win, you want more to be in the top 2, but it is possible for you to be lower down on the list, and all the lower preferences just keep building up and up, and you just overtake other people. But even then, if you've preferenced 1 to the person who's mid-tier and comes third in a race of 5, or 5 in a race of 10 or whatever, eventually either you're going to get a majority through preferences, or either with or without eliminating that candidate, so your vote gets transferred. It either gets transferred to someone who either is in the top 2, or it doesn't transfer because the other candidate was just so popular that it didn't matter. If Michael got 52% of the vote on first preferences, it wouldn't matter if everyone had just voted for Leo. If everyone else had voted for Leo, but 52% of people voted for Michael, then the preferences aren't counted. So basically, candidate B, if you preference candidate B1, you're not stopping candidate C from winning. If candidate A is more popular than both of those combined.
That makes sense.
Good question. Really, how to vote cards are suggestions on how to put your preferences. And the effectiveness actually really much varies. You find that it's more effective for major parties, probably because they have the resources to actually distribute a lot of them. And Clive Palmer is famously not short on resources, so I can't say anything about his particular motivations about his use of how to vote cards, but when it is a tight race, those sort of suggestions on how to preference something, especially for voters who aren't particularly opinionated, they're well, I like this party, but I don't care about the other ones. If they just okay, this is how I support this party, those sort of how to vote cards may be instrumental. So
that's really interesting, actually. I can't recall if the Climate 200 independents, if they ever had preferences, but I think a few of them now are not running any. Is that right? Leo would know that.
Yeah, I think by my memory, it's the same here because I'm in Kooyong with Monique Ryan. Generally same at the state elections as well. They just say one and go whatever the rest for the other numbers, which I think that does get some criticism, because you're like, well, for instance, like Ellie Smith in Dixon, you're like, well, why wouldn't you forcefully make sure you don't encourage voters to put Dutton up there? But look, I mean, it avoids them being linked to Labor and the Greens, which is obviously the main kind of
I think it's kind of
them.
smart, actually, for them not to have any other numbers, because we've just heard about Clive Palmer and all this. Every year there's a fight over who's getting number one, and someone's quit and all this stuff. So, the Teals sort of have that integrity thing that they do, and it kind of holds up when you see the rest of them squabbling over first, second, third preference, things like that. Maybe that's a part of it, just getting away so they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, it avoids that discourse, and it's interesting because, as David said, right, was the figures from Kevin Bonham on Twitter the other day were also interesting. That the rate of how to vote cards being followed in the House, it's about 45% for major parties, about 15% or less for anyone else. In the Senate, it's about 25 to 30 for majors, 10% for Greens, and a few percent for most others. So people think it is like a vast, like 90% follow how to vote cards to a T. That's just not the case. And as David said, and should be encouraged, I think the terminology around it in public discourse is a bit annoying at times. But, as has been rightly pointed out, they're suggestions, they're recommendations, with the exception of the Victorian State Upper House and Melbourne City Council. There is absolutely no way for your preferences to be controlled at this election. I think that's something that everyone should remember.
Everyone should remember that.
To wind that back a bit, just for those people that are coming in fresh or voting for the first time. I mean, the real, you can put whoever you want down, you can preference whoever you want, but if you're not au fait with the political system, and as Rex Patrick famously says, 20% of people are interested in politics, and the other 80% decide the outcome. So preferences have an impact, but as you guys say, it varies in different races, and different kinds of electorates. But has there been academic studies done on it in the past as to the power of preferences?
Well, I'm not entirely sure about academic studies on the power of preferences, but preferences can be quite significant. Like linking it back to our good friend Clive Palmer, he actually was elected in 2013 to the seat of Fairfax, and he won by 57 votes. The thing is, we don't use first past the post. Like, in first past the post, right? Like, the person who gets you just vote for one person, and the person who gets the most wins. They don't need a majority. In 2013, Clive Palmer's opponent, the Liberal National Party member of Ted O'Brien, got over 12,500 more first preferences. But all the other smaller parties, their preferences flowed towards Clive Palmer, and that's what elected him by a margin of 57. And also there were over 4,500 informal votes, and the turnout was 93%. So your comment of X amount of people care about politics, and then the result is decided by this huge amount that don't care, is actually quite true. I've been looking into the margins recently of the last election, and it got to a point I was trying to figure out how many seats is the margin smaller than the amount of people who did not show up, and it eventually became the opposite. Instead of trying to figure out that number, it started becoming, okay, how many seats actually have a margin larger than that? Let's go the other direction. It's scores. It's over 50. It's well over 50, maybe over 60, 70 seats that are determined by a margin smaller than the amount of people that don't show up. So
that don't show up to vote, you mean?
Yeah. So that don't show up to vote. So preferences are incredibly significant. They can override a margin of over 10,000 quite easily in these races. People should actually pay attention to who they're preferencing, and also go vote, because it is a massive determiner of who wins, especially given that the past several elections, the government has won by 1 or 2 seats. So, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, the eternal 48-52 poll and all of that stuff. And that's preferences total, right? Not just like the people who follow how to vote cards. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't break it down in that way. I wish they would. I wish we could
No.
get some demographics on that. That would be very interesting. Because I'm not sure that the how to vote cards that parties put out are particularly effective at all. And there's so much discourse around them. But really, I see a lot of discourse around people saying, "Oh, you have to vote one. If you don't vote one, then there's no chance of getting in." When really, obviously, you can put two, and then you might have a chance of still winning. Right? We have those three-cornered contests where some come in from third place.